Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of this statement. 18 months on from the referendum result, the Prime Minister has scraped through phase 1 of the negotiations. Scraped through after 18 months. 2 months later than planned, with many of the key aspects of phase 1 still not clear. This weekend, Cabinet members have managed to contradict each other. Indeed, some have managed to go even further and contradict themselves. Mr. Speaker, we respect the result of the referendum, but due to this government's shambolic negotiations, it's getting increasingly difficult to believe this is a government that is indeed even capable of negotiating a good deal for Britain. These negotiations, Mr. Speaker, are vital for people's jobs and for our economy. Our future prosperity depends on getting them right. So let us hope that today we can elicit some very uncharacteristic clarity from the Prime Minister. Firstly, on the financial statement, can the Prime Minister confirm the figure quoted by the Secretary of State for exiting the EU, that we will be paying between 35 and 39 billion in an exit payment? And after this weekend's confusion, can the Prime Minister clarify whether this payment is conditional on securing a final deal, as the Brexit Secretary said, or whether it's an obligation for the UK to pay, as the Chancellor said, or it's only part of a conditional? If so, how much? When can the Prime Minister publish a full breakdown of the settlement? Whether she agrees that the settlement should be audited by the National Audit Office and the the Office of Budget Responsibility. Finally, on the financial settlement, does the Prime Minister yet have any indication of what level of ongoing payments the UK will be making to the EU for ongoing participation in EU joint programmes and for ongoing membership of EU agencies? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of citizens' rights, can the Prime Minister confirm that they have agreed that the European Court of Justice will oversee the deal on EU citizens' rights for the next 8 years, and that the UK courts will have due regard to ECJ decisions indefinitely? Can the Prime Minister therefore update the House on her red line that there is no future role for the ECJ and what this means for trade negotiations? Importantly for British citizens living in European Union countries, can the Prime Minister confirm the government's negotiations mean they will maintain all of their existing rights indefinitely? And will she now, today, confirm that UK pensions will continue to be paid and uprated for all British citizens in the future? Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, on the complex question of the Irish border, again, Mr. Speaker, there are conflicting statements, this time between the Brexit Secretary and, of course, the Brexit Secretary. So, can the Prime Minister confirm whether the deal reached last week is legally enforceable or not? Article 46 of the published agreement seems pretty clear that, and I quote, "it must be upheld in all circumstances, irrespective of the nature of any future agreement between the European Union and the UK." And what does regulatory alignment mean? Does it mean the exact same rules or different rules with similar outcomes? And, if the latter, who would adjudicate if those different rules are similar enough or not? Which policy areas are covered, and how long does regulatory alignment last? Is it only for transition or for the implementation period, as the Prime Minister calls it, or is it permanent? Finally, on the question of deadlines. Mr. Speaker, this government wasted time on phase 1, partially with the general election, which I'm sure the Prime Minister now regrets calling. But the government originally aimed for phase 1 negotiations to be complete in October. Then everything was ready for an announcement on Monday, and ultimately we saw a rather fudged agreement late last week. So, has this experience given the Prime Minister reason to consider dropping the unnecessary exit date deadline of the 29th of March 2019 from the EU withdrawal bill? Because I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the whole House, and indeed I think probably the whole country, would rather get the best possible deal a little bit later if that meant a better deal for people's jobs and the economy. The second phase of negotiations will have a huge impact on our relationship with our largest trading partner. The Brexit Secretary committed to deliver, and I quote, the exact same benefits as now. Does that remain the government's aims? I assume it does, as the Prime Minister just said the UK will maintain full alignment with those rules of the internal market and the customs union. And I've left the trickiest question till last. Can the Prime Minister explain what the Brexit Secretary actually meant when he said that he wanted to have a trade relationships in the future which are CETA plus plus plus? Can she explain what on earth he was talking about? Mr. Speaker, I hope the Foreign Secretary is trying to bring clarity to the situation. I wish the Prime Minister well in adjudicating that debate. I hope the next crucial phase of negotiations are not punctuated by posturing, delays and disarray that have characterised the first phase, and I'm sure the whole country would welcome clarity from the Prime Minister on exactly what has just been agreed.
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, the only posturing that's been taking place have taken place from that bench over there in this House. He talks quite a lot about the issue of alignment. I have to say to him that I set out very clearly in my Lancaster House speech what we were determining, what were our objectives in these Brexit negotiations. I set that out further in some more detail in the speech that I gave in Florence. Meanwhile, the Labour Party has had 12 different Brexit plans. In fact, I have to say that the right honourable gentleman has had so many Brexit plans he can't even reach alignment with himself. But to answer his questions, first of all, he started off by saying that he wanted to uphold the referendum, and then later in his comments he said he didn't want to accept the leave date of the 29th of March 2019. We're leaving the European Union on that date. That is what the British people voted for, and that is what this government is going to put in place. He asked about the financial settlement. We have agreed the scope of the commitments and methods for valuation and adjustments to those values, and it is the case that the calculations currently say that would be £35 to £39 billion. So the answer to his question is yes. He asked about whether this was conditional on securing a deal. It is clear in the Joint Progress Report, I have repeated it in my statement just now, that this offer is on the table in the context of us agreeing the partnership for the future, agreeing the next stage and agreeing the partnership for the future. If we don't agree that partnership, then this offer is off the table. He asked about how much we were going to pay into joint programmes. Well, the point is that's all part for the negotiation in phase 2, and that will be negotiated depending on the programme and depending on the agency, should we wish to remain part of it. He said, would I confirm that the ECJ will oversee the rights for EU citizens for the next 8 years? The answer to that is no, because they won't be overseeing the rights of EU citizens for the next 8 years. I made it absolutely clear that citizens' rights will be determined by the courts here in the UK. He asked about the legal nature of that agreement. It will be brought into law in this country in the withdrawal and implementation bill that will be brought before this House. He asked about pensions being paid for UK citizens. Yes, that will continue. He asked whether the arrangements that were in place in relation to citizens' rights in the ECJ would have an impact on other parts of the deal. Paragraph 41 of the joint report makes very clear that this in no way prejudges discussions on other elements of the withdrawal agreement. He asked about alignment. What is necessary is that we have the same objectives. We may reach those objectives in different ways, but what we need to ensure, and this isn't a theological argument, it's about the practical decisions that need to be made to ensure that that trade across the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland can continue. And that's what we will be looking at. But as I and the Taoiseach have been very clear in our discussions, we both believe that we should be working to ensure that this can be achieved through our overall agreement between the UK and the European Union, and that is indeed what we should be aiming for. And I have to say, he asked about the trade deal, about CETA+++. We've always said that we're not looking for a deal that's Norway and we're not looking for a deal that is CETA. What we're looking for is a deal that is right for the United Kingdom. Sadly, we know what a Labour approach to these negotiations would mean. It would mean paying the European Union billions of pounds every year in perpetuity. It would mean following EU rules with no say over them. It would mean no divergence from EU rules in the future whatsoever. It would mean zero control of immigration. I have to say to the right honourable gentleman, that wouldn't make a success of Brexit. That would be no Brexit at all.